The following stories are told from a female's point of view. Number 3. This happened to me when I was in 11th grade. I'm a female, and I tend to be a people pleaser. I never like to call anyone out, reject anyone outright, or act like someone is being weird. I'm also a bit open-minded, and I tend to go with the flow. School started in early September, and in my marine biology class, I noticed that there was this boy that kept staring at me from the corner of my eye. I just made one of those half smiles towards him to acknowledge him, and went on about my assignment. I really did not think much of it for a couple of weeks, even though he continued to stare. He was very skinny and tall, had brown hair. His eyes were so brown that they looked black. He had a generally nondescript face, other than his super dark eyes. One day he decided to say hi. I said hello back to him, and he told me his name, which was Alex. I told him mine, but he said that he already knew my name. That wasn't a surprise, as I have rather large handwriting, and he could have easily watched me write my name down on one of my papers. Since he was staring at me so much, it was kind of odd that he didn't really have any facial expression when he flatly said that he knew my name. I just sort of laughed it off, said, "Oh, okay," and began putting my things in my bag as the bell was about to ring. I only had a few friends, and we always sat at the same table during lunch. We were all rather quiet, and most times read while we ate. That means I usually don't look around the lunchroom, as I have my eyes in my book. This day my friend finished her novel, so I decided to put mine away and just talk. I immediately noticed Alex staring inside at us from the courtyard tables. He never seemed to be embarrassed that I noticed him. I showed him to my friend and told her about my class with him. She found it to be super creepy, but I said he's probably harmless and was just socially awkward. I arrived in marine biology a little early later that day, and so it was just myself, Alex, and one other girl for about 10 minutes. I did that half smile at Alex, and then decided to break out my book and start reading again. He had his hands folded over his mouth and was staring again. This time, it just felt awkward, because we were basically alone now. I glanced over at him and kind of raised my eyebrows, as if to say, "Yes?" He looked me up and down very slowly, and I asked him if he was okay. He said yes, and that he was just inside of his head, thinking, "Okay, whatever, that's fine." The next day at lunch, there was a little piece of paper on the table that we sat at. It had my name on the front. Not just my first name, my first and middle name. I opened it, and it said something like, "I wonder what your asshole would look like with a PVC pipe shoved up it." What the fuck? I looked around. I didn't see Alex, but I immediately knew it was him. I was very scared to come to class later that day, but he wasn't there. I felt a lot better about not seeing him. The note itself was gross and embarrassing. I didn't want to show any administrators because of that, so I just threw it out. I went to the bus area at the end of the day, like usual, but this time, I noticed Alex leaning on one of the pillars with his backpack on one shoulder. I literally felt chills down my spine when I noticed a white PVC pipe poking out of the top of his backpack through the zippers. I didn't give him any reaction to my knowledge, even though I'm sure he had watched me read the note. The next morning, I made an appointment with a counselor and had my class changed. She was very reluctant to do that for me, because we were already in the school year well over a month and a half, but I think since I have a history of good grades and behavior, she helped me out. I spent the rest of the year avidly avoiding him. He kept staring at me at lunchtime, and one time he took photos of me at the bus area without my consent. Even though it was against school policy, I got some pepper spray for when I get off at my bus stop. I have no clue what happened to him, because when 12th grade began, he was no longer at our school. I'm not sure if I even want to know how he turned out. Number 2. So when I was a senior in high school, this would have been around 2007, I was out of the blue contacted one day by this random guy on MySpace. I vaguely recognized him, but I didn't know him. He told me that he knew me from school, and that I had tutored him in math a couple of times. This should have been my first red flag that something was off. I hate math, and I've never tutored anyone on that topic. I told him that he was mistaken, but I tried to be nice to him and we struck up a friendly conversation. Soon, the guy, Brian, started talking to me at school. It started off pretty innocently. He was giving me more attention than I wanted from him, but I was kind of flattered by it, and I didn't really think much of it at the time. He was a couple of years younger than me, and I figured he had developed a crush on me primarily because we're both kind of odd compared to the other kids at our high school. It was a very small school. My graduating class was only about 40 people, and he and I were two of a very small number of alternative kids there. He was emo, while I tended to be more of the punk variety. Both of us loved My Chemical Romance. I figured he was into me because there weren't many other girls there with similar interests. Before long, he started waiting for me at my locker every day, between every class. He started following me around before school and during lunch. He started coming to my performances. I was in drama and choir. I tried to be polite, but started avoiding him. The situation continued to escalate to the point where he was sexually harassing me every chance I failed to avoid him. If he was waiting for me at my locker, he would say sexually explicit things to me, tell me what he wanted to do to me, and would also tell me that when he was having sex with his girlfriend, that he wished she was me. At homecoming, he left his girlfriend waiting awkwardly while he came to me and told me that he really wanted all of us to have a threesome. Luckily, my girlfriends were with me and came over as soon as they noticed him talking to me, which made him scurry away. As quickly as it started, it was over. One day he stopped showing up at school. I was relieved but curious. After about a month of him being gone, my friend mentioned him in front of my dad, who was also the principal of my high school. My dad asked me about what happened, and I ended up telling him the whole story. He seemed really troubled. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me why Brian was absent from school recently. Apparently, not long after homecoming, Brian had strapped some fireworks to a cat and set them off. The cat exploded, and Brian laughed. He got caught and was sent to jail, and then was committed to a psychiatric facility by his parents after he was released. I don't know what happened to him after that. I'm thinking I dodged a bullet though, because he turned out to be even crazier than I thought he was. Number 1. This happened when I was in high school. A few weeks in, I had made a few friends and I was keen on making more, so I would socialize a lot in the hopes that I would get more friends out of it. I was still somewhat new to the school and one day, I got lost. This is where I met the guy who would eventually become my stalker. He showed me around and helped me get to the class I needed to go to, and we made conversation, and at first I thought he would be nice to have as a friend. A week passed and I had made a few more friends at this point. I wanted to hang out with him as much as I could. I felt a little bad because my other friend was a bit of a loner, so I invited him to come hang out with us. He didn't talk much at first, but after a while he eventually opened up to me, and then he wouldn't shut up. He mostly talked to me. He started asking me advice on life and whatnot, and I was happy to help. That is, until he started asking me to pat his head like a dog and make him wear a leash. It was a bit weird, you might say. I passed it off as a joke, and I humored him, something I never should have done. He started calling me his master or mistress. I asked him not to do that, and I told him that I wasn't comfortable with his behavior, but it was apparently too late to fix things. He started skipping his classes to walk into and get kicked out of mine. He would follow me around all day, and if I would go to the restroom, guess who would follow me inside? I asked him to stop many times. He refused, so I tried to get the school involved. They had no proof of stalking, and I found that kinda strange since many of my teachers have kicked him out of my classes, but nevertheless, nothing happened. He began to get more aggressive when I asked one of my guy friends to help me out with a homework assignment. My stalker overheard this from around the corner and didn't like who I asked for help. After that, he would pretty much fight and harass every male I would talk to. Some would probably find this flattering, but I found it annoying and immature. I tried to tell him not to worry and that we were just friends, but his exact wording was,
"They don't deserve you. They are worthless compared to my master."
I then yelled at him. I do feel bad because it was quite harsh, but I was about fed up with his bullshit, and if he wanted to act like a dog, I was going to treat him like one. I thought I was finally free from that cycle. He finally stopped following me around, until one day I found this letter in my locker. In this letter, my stalker gave his disgust for males and his hate for himself, and that he must be evil for his master to treat him this way, and that I must be taught not to shun pets. It was a few pages long, and it was very disturbing. In fact, it was the most terrifying thing I had ever read, especially when I got done reading it and looked up and saw him staring at me from down the hall. He came up to me and opened his phone and started showing me pictures of a cartoon character who had a similar appearance to me, with the same brown eyes and curly hair. Then, he tried to hand me a leash and asked me to walk him around. At that point, I ran away, up to the office, letter in hand. The principal finally had the proof he needed and agreed to step in. The cops got involved, and soon after, a restraining order was put in place. He was expelled and wasn't allowed within 50 feet of me. About a month after that, I was sitting in my room one night, doing some homework, when I heard a scratch at the window. I looked over, and then froze in pure terror. My stalker was standing just outside my bedroom window. He had a collar around his neck, and a leash was dangling down from it. He was intensely glaring at me through the glass. His face then crooked into a disgusting grin, before licking the surface of the window and ran off. I flipped out and woke my parents, who called the police. When the cops showed up, I told them who it was and what he did. They collected the evidence from my window and arrested my stalker for breaking the restraining order. Thankfully, I moved out of that town a month later, and I never heard from my stalker again. I still have nightmares about this to this day. Being stalked was not romantic or fun. It was terrifying, bone-shaking, and nerve-wracking, and the worst thing I have ever gone through. But I do hope that he got those issues worked out.
There's always a reason to be afraid.